it's so good to have you. My name is Kyle, if we haven't had a chance to get to know each other, and I'm just glad that you're choosing to spend your very sunny Sunday with us. Who likes that sunshine? I love it. Yeah. Hey, we got a hot crowd in here. With the weather this good, I cannot fail today. Here I go. Just kidding. Hey, well, before we get started today, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. 2 weeks ago, we mentioned that we are kicking off a season of selecting and choosing new elders. These are our spiritual leaders at BridgeWay. And so we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I won't go into too much detail, but at the info table, you can pick up an elder nomination form. So if you are a member of BridgeWay, if you're part of our family, you can go, you can read more about what an elder is and what qualifies an individual to be an elder. Sign up and write your nominations for candidates down on that, and then our elders will consider those over the next few weeks. So you've got 2 weeks to do that, so don't delay. You can do that right now. I was going to say it's like early voting, although it's not really a vote, but that's besides the point. Do it now, and then you can pick up those at the info table. Also, next week, we're going to be kicking off a brand new series called Wisdom, and I'm really excited about this series because I think really what we're going to be talking about over about a 5-week period can really impact your life. So wisdom, my basic premise for this series is that we don't need any more information. We have Google, we have more information, we have more knowledge at our fingertips at this point in history than any other time in human history. Think about that. Every book, everything, it's all available to us. We have so much information, yet at the same time, I would argue that we have less wisdom in our lives now than at any other point in history. And wisdom is so important for you. If you want to understand, not just, and wisdom is way more than just knowing stuff, but it really helps you to live and to move from a completely different place. It is so important for us. So I think it's going to be a great time. So next week we'll kick that off. Again, if you needed one more piece of evidence for this, you look at a joint session of Congress. Never once in a single room there been more information and knowledge, yet less wisdom. That's an equal opportunity political joke. We make fun of all political parties at BridgeWay, but hey, we got a sneak peek. Let's take a look, and then we'll get into our conversation this morning. We're going to follow that up with a series called The Power of Punctuation. Well, hey, we're closing down our series called Unfair this week, and we have been in this series all this month exploring why Christianity is unfair and why it's good news. We kicked it off in Easter talking about the unfairness of grace. Then we took 2 weeks unpacking why forgiveness is unfair, but why it just holds the key to freedom in your life. So today, as we conclude our series, we're going to be ending on a topic that I'm probably the most passionate about. When I get talking about this particular subject, like my blood pressure goes up in like a good way. I don't get like mad, but it like just elevates in an appropriate way. I'll just say that. I'm so passionate about this topic because not only do I think it's important, I believe it's also the key to experiencing the kind of spiritual vitality, the kind of abundant life that Jesus talks about. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to talk about what it means to exist for lost people and why existing for lost people is unfair. It's so important for us to realize, especially in the context of a faith community like BridgeWay, like at a church, that we exist, that our true purpose as a community exists to serve those not in the community. But we're also going to find that that's inherently unfair, but we also are going to learn that that is where the true life is. Because again, when Jesus says in John 10:10, he says to his followers, I have come so that you can experience life and life to the full, or an abundant kind of life. He doesn't mean, hey, you become aware of me, you become a fan of me and you will experience this life. He says, no, when you come and follow me, then you will experience this kind of energetic vitality, spiritual, this thing that Jesus promises us. But you will only experience that if you participate with Jesus in his mission and in his purpose. Now, Jesus leaves no doubt as to what he came to the earth to do. He says specifically, he says, the Son of Man, referring to himself, he says, the Son of Man came to seek and save that which was, help me out, lost. He came to seek and save that which was lost. So if you today are a Christian, if you consider yourself to be kind of in the club, in the community, this is a conversation for you, because I believe when you participate with Jesus in this mission, not only will you experience unfairness, but you will also experience the thing that you are probably most looking for in your relationship with God. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a passage of Scripture. We're actually going to work through most of an entire chapter of the Bible, which is a lot of Bible reading. So if you haven't read your Bibles today, we're going to take care of you. Wow. Okay. Luke 15. Open it up. All right. We're going to look at a story found in Luke 15. It's actually a collection of 3 stories that Jesus tells about lost things being found. Now, the reason why he gives us these 3 stories is because he's responding to some criticism that he is receiving from the Pharisees, which are the religious and cultural rulers of the day. See, these Pharisees are not happy with Jesus because Jesus consistently hangs out with the wrong people at the wrong places and at the wrong times. And so these Pharisees, they're saying, hey, this is not cool, Jesus. You ought not to be hanging out with these people. You shouldn't be going to these places. And so they're really upset with Jesus. So let's read together what they say here in verse 1. It says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating, he being Jesus, was associating with such sinful people, and get this, even eating with them. And so it's important to realize here, though, that Jesus is responding to this, but it's also important to realize that if we are following Jesus into this mission of reaching lost people, of existing for people on the fringe of community, you will receive pushback, probably from other religious people. Jesus consistently gets called out for this. People consistently say, Jesus, you ought not to be hanging out with them. You shouldn't go there. And if you do this, if you follow Jesus, you might get some pushback. That's what happened to Jesus. You can bet that it's going to happen to you. So as Jesus listens to this criticism, he jumps into telling 3 stories. There's a story of a coin, of a sheep, of a lost coin, and a lost son. So let's begin today in verse 3. It says, so Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep. In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and who haven't strayed away. So Jesus, again, he's talking about sheep, and I know that you and I don't get excited about sheep, but in this culture, sheep were incredibly important. This is how many people earned their living. It's how they got wool and sheep's milk and other things you get from sheep. I don't know anything else you get of sheep, actually. But these are really important. So for us, though, I know most of us are not really into sheep, so think about these are like Ferrari sheep, okay? They're like Ferrari sheep. They're super cool. You want as many sheep as possible, right? Okay, so fill in your blank there if it's like Ferraris or whatever it is. So it's like 100 of those. And what Jesus says is, hey, the good shepherd, when he finds that out of 100 sheep, that one of these sheep has gone away, he says the good shepherd goes out, finds the one sheep, and brings it back. Now, he's talking to people here who understand the concepts of shepherding very well. And people in that crowd would be like, Jesus, that actually doesn't make any sense. Because if you are a shepherd, if you have 100 sheep, you don't leave 99 sheep to go find one. Why? Because 99 sheep is still a lot of sheep. You know, think about you, if you're in like business or if you have accounts or clients, think about if you have 100 clients and if you have one problematic client, What would happen if your boss noticed you were spending all of your time on that one problematic client? They would say, hey, don't worry about the one client. Why don't you focus on the 99 other good clients you have? What Jesus is actually proposing here is not what a good shepherd actually does. It is what the good shepherd does. This is very counterintuitive to Jesus' audience because they say, hey, look, 99%, that is a pretty darn good retention rate. But also, think about this from the perspective of the sheep. And I don't know if you do this, but I have lots of time on my hands, so sometimes I think about what a sheep must be feeling. That's why they, don't worry, your tithing dollars are hard at work, me just thinking about sheep all day. But I was thinking through, like, what might the other sheep be feeling in this moment? All right, let's just think about that. If you're the 99 sheep, let's say Bob, we'll call him Bob the sheep. Bob is the sheep who always seems to run away. Right, so you're hanging out there at the sheep water cooler, talking to your sheep friends, and you say, did you hear that Bob has ran away again? But as frustrating as that would be even more frustrating is you're talking like, hey, why does the shepherd always leave us to go after that one lost sheep? We'll call him Bob. Why is it? Think of how unfair this actually would be for the sheep. Think of how you would feel. See, the shepherd has an important job. The shepherd's job is to protect the sheep, to keep lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, sorry, had to do it. Lions, trying to keep thieves away. That's his job. And so if I'm a sheep, I'm saying, well, this shepherd running after this lost sheep has now actually put me in jeopardy and me at risk. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to be led to like a fresh pasture or a stream or something, but the shepherd is out looking for that lost sheep instead of protecting and looking after my needs. See, it would feel pretty unfair, I think, to be one of the 99 good sheep. Right? If I'm a sheep, I'm thinking, well, I'm paying that guy's bills. My wool and my whatever else sheep give you. I'm not being taken care of, and I'm the one providing him his livelihood. I might look at this and say, I might need to find another flock that suits my needs a little bit better if I'm that sheep. But what Jesus does here is he begins this story, he tells this story to, I think, tell us something really important about what he is all about. He's saying, I'm the good shepherd and I go after the one lost sheep, even though it's bad management. Even though it doesn't make sense, even though some of the other sheep might get upset, what I am here to do is I'm going after the one lost sheep. And so then he says, hey, actually, what happens in heaven, there's a spiritual reality here. He's saying when one lost sheep or when one lost person, and really you can think of a lost person, someone outside the faith community, when that person actually brought in, we get more excited than 100 other people who are good. Now, more excited. It doesn't mean that heaven is not excited when the 99 sheep are good and righteous and kind of playing by the rules. It says there is joy. It just says there's more joy when one person comes home. And that's unfair, if you think about it. Speaking of which, I actually have something a bone to pick with you. Because I, every week, work really hard on my sermon. I work hard. I try to preach as good as I can. I know that Will and our creative team, he gets up there and they practice and play their guts out. You know what you guys never do at the end of the day? Is you never celebrate for my sermon. You never clap. There's never like a standing ovation. There's never like tears pouring down, right? We can play the best song and you'd be like, yeah, that's a good song, Here's one thing though and I love you guys, but you're not like an overly rowdy bunch. I'll just say this. One thing though, there's one thing that happens at BridgeWay that no matter what has happened before or after, this place goes nuts. And that is when one person chooses to take their next step of baptism. That's unfair. But do you know that we like it like that at BridgeWay? We like it because we get more excited, just like heaven gets more. We get more excited about one person choosing to take their step of baptism and be brought into God's family. We get more excited about that than you getting some solid content or some great worship time on Sunday mornings. That is unfair, but Jesus is giving us a little hint saying, hey, look, this is what it looks like in the kingdom. The good shepherd goes out for the one. He leaves the 99, and there's a party in heaven when one sinner comes home. So he tells this story of the sheep. Then he tells a story about a lost coin. He says, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she will call in her friends and neighbors and say, rejoice with me because I have found my lost coin. In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. Now, I've read that like a million times, and you probably heard that too. And I always assume that this is just a retelling of the first story. Lost coin, found, party, good. But I think what Jesus is telling us here, there's something going on here. There's a few details that make me think that Jesus is trying to expand our understanding a little bit. There's a few important details here. First of all, a Greek coin. So one of these would be called drachma. A Greek drachma, it was equal to about a day's wages in this time. So think about it. You have 10 days worth of wages and you lose a whole day's worth of money. That's not an insignificant amount. Right? Imagine how much you make in a day, and imagine that just like, I don't know, you lost it out of your wallet or something. That's a significant amount of money. That is something valuable. Now, I also thought it was interesting that Jesus says a woman lost a coin. And I think what's interesting here is that women in this culture would most likely have not had a day job where they would earn a wage. They wouldn't have had a trade. However, the woman or the wife in the relationship would oftentimes be responsible for managing the household. And this is not just cleaning and raising kids. She would actually be responsible for buying land and managing estates, and she would actually be participating in this way. But the money, in a sense, was not hers. It was entrusted to her by her husband. In a sense, she had been given something valuable that was her responsibility to manage and to invest and to take care of, and that thing goes missing. Have you ever house sat for someone with a dog? No one? Okay. All right. One time I was house sitting for a friend, and they had a dog. And I kid you not, the first night, the dog goes missing. Now, if this is my dog, that's a bad day. No one wants to lose their dog. But there is something that happens when it is your friend's dog. And so you think I would call them and tell them. Of course, I didn't call them and tell them. No way, I'm not doing that. But I went nuts. I was out driving in the neighborhoods. Like I was going to like cook a steak and just leave it out there. Like, hey, you got a reason to come home, dog. There is something that happens with you, with us, when we realize we've been entrusted with something valuable that we've been responsible for taking care of. When that thing goes missing, you do all sorts of irrational things to restore that which was lost. This woman gets up, presumably in the middle of the night. She lights a lantern, so this would not be a great time to search for a coin. She lights a lantern, and she is sweeping and flipping over couch cushions and looking under, things to look for this coin until she finds it. Because she has been entrusted with something valuable, it has been lost, and she is willing to do something crazy and irrational, and people would have looked at her like, what are you doing? It's because something has been entrusted to me that is valuable, that has been lost, and I'm not going to stop until it's found. Interesting little thing that Jesus is painting. So we've got a lost sheep. Shepherd goes out for the one sheep, leaves the 99. It's bad management. It's counterintuitive. Now this woman has rearranged her entire life to find something that was valuable, that was entrusted to her. So what Jesus, he's starting to paint a really compelling picture here. And this is when he gets into the third of the stories that he tells. Now this story is called the parable of the lost son, or you may have heard of it as the prodigal son. Now, I'll just tell you this parable alone is one of the most dense stories that Jesus tells. And really, there's entire volumes of books that have been written on this one story. So we're not going to be able to unpack every part of it together. Otherwise, we'd be here for 4 hours, which I assume you don't want to do. Okay. So I want to paraphrase the first part, and then I want to jump in at the very end because there's going to be a few things that happen that Jesus brings this story together. I think he's going to bring it together for us a little bit too. So the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son basically goes like this. There's a father with 2 sons, the older son and the younger son. The younger son goes to his dad and says, "Dad, I would like my share of the inheritance now." In a sense, he would say, I prefer that you were dead and that I had your stuff. It's an incredibly offensive thing that the son asks. For some reason, the father says, okay, I'm going to give you your share now. So he gives all of the money and his inheritance to the son, and the son splits and he goes out to call it a faraway country where he said he squandered it on wild living. He was out developing a testimony, as we say in church world. You know what I mean? So he's out, he's doing the party thing, he's living crazy, he's boozing women and all this. So he is out living and partying it up, and then eventually though the money runs out. He squanders it all, and all of the people that were hanging around him, the people that wanted to be his friend, they all left because the party was over. So at this exact time, there's also a famine that hits, and so there's no food to be found, and this guy finds himself starving. So he ends up going and hires himself out to a pig farmer, which to a Jewish person would be the lowest, most offensive thing you could possibly think of. So he's out there working with pigs. He's kind of gone to that rock bottom, and he says, you know what, my father's servants are treated better than I am. I'm going to go back. And so he goes back and he manufactures this speech. He says, I've got a speech prepared. I'll say, Dad, I sinned against you and against heaven and the earth, and please take me back. And so he has this whole speech ready. But then it says his father sees the son coming from a long way out, which is unfair because that means his dad was out waiting for his son to come home. But again, we don't have time to go there. He comes and he runs to his son, and he embraces him back into the family. So here's where we pick up in verse 22. It says, his father said to his servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. Again, he's been preparing for a party, which I find very interesting. We must celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So the party began. It's interesting that the other thing that these stories have in common is there's a lost thing that's found, and then what ensues? A party. So the party begins. Then it says, meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. It's interesting. In a sense, he's kind of, Jesus is saying, hey, he's one of the 99 sheep. This older son was the one who has stayed home, doing his thing, who's been a good son. He's working in the fields. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. And he asked one of the servants what was going on. He said, your brother is back, he was told. And your father has killed the fattened calf, and we are celebrating because of his safe return. It says the older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. So let's pause. It's really easy, especially if you heard the story, to kind of limit, you kind of have a caricature, like, oh, this is the bad older son. But let's think about what's actually happened to the older son. So first of all, at the beginning of the story, when the younger son is given his share of the inheritance, this is a landed culture, right? So part of your inheritance is physical property. It's sheep. It's actual physical stuff. It's not just cash that's separated. So there is a split of this. So the estate has been cut in half. Now the older brother then is like, okay, the younger brother has shamed us. He's taken that away, but at least he's gone, and at least that's behind. But when the younger son comes back, and when the father places a ring on his finger, that makes him reinstated on both a familial level, but a legal level. Translation, now he is an heir again to the rest of the father's stuff. So you had half. Now the older brother has had his inheritance now cut in half. The older brother has been materially wronged. Not only have they had to, as a family, suffer the humiliation and shame of a younger brother doing what he did, but now he comes back, and now what that son had been working for, what he had been saving up for, what he he said, hey, I've been here, I've been working in the fields. Now that is being cut in half because this son is back. So this is a real material wrong that has been perpetuated against this brother. This is unfair, and it's like seriously unfair. But then let's continue to read. So the older brother was angry and wouldn't go in, but his father came out and begged him. So his father comes out and says, please come into this party. Please, why don't you join the celebration because of your brother? Let's see here. He says, his father came out and begged him, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to do. And in all that time, you never even gave me one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back, he doesn't even have can't even say his brother's name. He's not my brother. He's your son. When your son came back, right, he's trying to distance himself from when your son comes back, you celebrate by killing the fatted calf. And this is such an interesting thing. Again, we don't have time to fully go into it here, but look at what the older son has done. The older son has misjudged the character and the nature of his father. What do we know about this father? This father practices irrational generosity. He's willing to give up his rights. He's willing to give away of his son and suffer embarrassment and all that. And even that, he brings his son back. So we know that this is a generous, benevolent father. We know that this is a father who loves to celebrate. Yet the older son's view of his dad is that he is a slave driver. Why? Because slave drivers have slaves. He says, I've been slaving away for you. I've been working, and you haven't. He thinks you're a slave driver and you are cheap. You won't even give me a goat. That's what the older brother, so the older brother has misjudged his father. And just a quick note, when you get your picture of God wrong, you then start to see yourself wrong. If you see God as a slave driver, that makes you a slave. If you see God as a guy who's a vindictive guy who's got his thumb on you, that is ultimately going to affect how you live out in the world. So important to realize that. So at the very end, it says this, his father said to him, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and came back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. And that's where the story ends. Let's review. Jesus says that a good shepherd leaves the 99 sheep to go find the one, and that there's a party when the one is found. Then he says there is a woman with a coin who loses her coin. When the coin is lost or is found, there is a party. And then he says there is a son who has been lost and now has been found, and there's a party again. But guess what? We don't know what happens now. We don't know if the older brother chooses to join the party. Why? Well, because this brother has been subjected to unfairness. The older brother has been wronged. He's been, it's not a fair situation. And the question is, and the real tension of the story is the older brother going to choose to join in on the celebration? Or is he going to say, I am sitting out on the outside? This is an interesting, this is why the story has so much power. Because if you're anything like me, you think, okay, am I the older son or am I the younger son? So we think in this, if I'm the younger son, that means I've gone out and lived my crazy life and sowed the wild oats and and I've come home, right? So that's how we usually interact with the story. We say, am I the older brother who's, but we have to realize that we are all the older brother in this story with a choice in front of each of us. We get to choose. Do we want to have it fair and stay out of the party? Do we want to make sure that, hey, that younger brother or that son of yours, the way he screwed up, I am not joining the party because I want to preserve my rights. The price of admission into the party that the father is throwing is unfairness. Because something that was lost has been found. The question is, do we want to join the party? Now, for us, this is an interesting place to leave us. And as I said today, the whole purpose of our conversation today is to examine what it means to press into unfairness as a faith community, what it means to live unfairly for the lost as a faith community. And this is an interesting place where we find ourselves today as a church. Now, today I realize there are people in the room who are probably new. Maybe you're new to church. Maybe you're new to BridgeWay. So for a moment, we're glad that you're here, but I'm going to talk to our BridgeWay family for a moment because it's so important that we understand this. And if nothing else, it'll be great for you to understand, like, hey, this is how we operate as a family. But I think there is a choice set before us as a faith community. I want to be a church. I want to participate in a church that is unfair. There's oftentimes there's this inertia, though, for us in a faith community. We want to operate in a fair mindset. We want to say, hey, look, we have certain traditions, faith traditions represented. We have certain denominations. And so we want to do church in a way that kind of preserves my plot of land, as it were. Oftentimes, though, what we're called to as a faith community, if we want to partner with the work of Jesus Christ, which is to seek and save that which was lost, we as a community then have to exist for those who are not inside of our own community. That is an unfair way to exist. Did you know that? That is an unfair way to think about how we operate as a faith community. For us, I believe we have been placed here in Flower Mound for a very specific purpose. Let me just tell you what the purpose is not for a moment. The purpose is not to get more people who come from other churches who are looking for a smaller, more community-oriented church. That is not part of the mission statement of BridgeWay. Now, some of you are like, oh, that kind of makes me feel uncomfortable because I came from wherever. We are happy to have you insofar as you want to partner with our mission of seeking and saving that which was lost. There's not a lot of amens to that part. That is why we are here as a church. I believe that for so many of us who follow Jesus, we're searching for that abundant life that Jesus talks about. John 10:10, I came so that they could experience life and life to the full. So many of us wake up each and every day and we experience something other than that in our Christian walk. Is that not true? We sometimes say, is that all there is? I come to church. I'm not like having a faith crisis, but this isn't exactly abundant and flowing. I wonder, could it be that we have started to exist more for ourselves, more for our faith communities, for our traditions, for our denominations, more than it is to say we are sacrificing what we value in order to reach people who are not in this community? That is what we are here for as a church. That is the direction we as a staff and as an elder are leading. We are leading in a way away from ourselves. We're asking the question of how can we help introduce more people to this risen, resurrected Jesus? We aren't thinking about, hey, how do we preserve our traditions? How do we keep things working for us? We say, how do we die to ourselves? How do we live unfairly? How do we say it's not about me, but it's about those outside of this community? And so what it does is it starts to change the way that we think about everything that we do. Each day in our staff meetings and each day at our elders, we're asking ourselves the question of how can we be more effective, not at reaching more people, but at reaching the lost. It's really good for you to know this, because if you're not on board with this, I believe we're going to need your seat. So there are probably other churches for you. But it's so important that you realize this. At BridgeWay Church, we are committed to not examine what works for us, but what will help a person come to know Jesus. Now, for those of us who are like, well, wait, how do I go deeper? Guys, it's not about what you know that will take you deeper. You will go deeper when you go out and start making disciples. Jesus doesn't say, come follow me, and you're going to learn a whole bunch of Greek and Hebrew words. We're going to go deep into the Torah, people. No, Jesus says, come follow me, and I'm going to make you what? Fishers of men. I'm going to go out. If you want to follow me, you're going to join with me in a discipleship-making process. And guess what? You can't disciple someone you haven't evangelized. So what we do from a church perspective is we ask ourselves hard questions. We say, hey, how can we design environments? How can we say certain things that on one hand help to encourage, and I want to see Christians grow and get excited, so I'm all about that, and hopefully you do grow. But what we're also wanting to do is we want people to come and take their first step of faith here. Why? Because this is a place where people can come and hear about the good news of Jesus. Amen. So we ask ourselves questions. We say, All right, I told you this is sort of insiders. Here we go. Most of you know that my name is Kyle. Why? Because I say it every week. Do you know why I say it every week? It's because we assume that you are bringing someone into this community maybe from your work or school who maybe doesn't know Jesus and doesn't know about church or pastors, and they're afraid that like pastors are just really holy people, and they're like, hey, that guy's name is Kyle, and he's happy I'm here today. You know, some of you say, hey, you know that video you play at the beginning of worship? It's the same every week. We're like, yeah, we know. Why? It's because we want to have, before we do this thing called worship, we want to let people know what's going to happen. We want to understand that we are celebrating what Jesus has done, and we get together, and in the same way that you were celebrating at a concert on Saturday night, celebrating peace, love, and whatever, we're here to celebrate a risen Jesus Christ, and that's why we're excited about it. We just want to let you know. So what we do is we think about everything we do here because ultimately we expect that you are out telling people about this man called Jesus. We want you to be telling people about what he's done for your life. You say, hey, come to this community where you can learn more and be encouraged and celebrate and grow. And guess what? We're not going to freak you out. You know, we do communion every week. And this is a tension, right? This is a perfect example. We do communion, which is inherently not for lost people. We do that. And we're okay with that. However, we say, hey, this is what communion is. It's a time where we remember the sacrifice of Jesus and what he's done. We remember when he tells us that we will be known by our love for one another. And when we take this cup and this juice, we don't think it's blood. We don't think it's his body. Again, remember Jesus, when he talks about communion, when he says, hey, eat my flesh and drink my blood, people leave Jesus. You guys remember that? Let's not forget that this is a bizarre ritual that we do. And it's meaningful, and we protect that, but we also want to explain it so that your friend who doesn't know about Jesus, who doesn't know about communion or the Last Supper, can say, oh, I understand. And if you can let that, we say, you can pass it if you want to. We don't want you to get stuck with tradition. We want you to experience Jesus. You guys follow that? That's why we do what we do. And we are only going to ask those questions more. We're only going to say, how can we exist not for ourselves, but for the people outside the community? And I will tell you, when you catch this, because it's not taught, it's caught. I can't teach you to be excited about lost people. But when you experience it, something will happen to you on a deep level. You will experience a financial, who knows, finance could have it, a vitality. You will experience this abundant, overflowing kind of life that Jesus talks about because you are seeing something lost become found. That is where the party is. And I guarantee you will go deeper in Scripture, you will go deeper in prayer and worship when you are about the business of disciple making. That is how you go deep. It's not because I've given you a particularly pithy, exegetical breakdown of Revelation or something. I'm all for that, by the way. Just, that's not what we're doing here. We're about helping lost things become found. We want to be a church that says, you know what? We're going to press into unfairness and we're going to join the party. I think BridgeWay should be the most unfair church in Flower Mound. We're going to unfairly show grace to those who people don't show grace to. We are going to be unfairly forgiving. We're going to forgive, and we're not going to stop at once. We're going to stop at 7 times, 77 times. You know what I'm saying? We're going to press into unfairness because we've learned through this series that is where the life is. Jesus died to that fairness, and then you will experience something incredible, and you will partner with me on my mission of seeking and saving that which was lost. I'll just tell you, excited or not, that's the church we are going to be. So it would be a great opportunity take an inventory. If you are excited about that, man, I'll tons of room for you. If you're not excited about it, there's literally a church next door. I'm just saying. And I love those guys. But there's other churches to go to. There are other churches, and they would be happy to have you. But we are here to make lost things, to help lost things become found. That is our purpose, and we're going to continue to press into that unfairness, to continue to exist, not for us, but for those outside the community. And I can tell you, that's as long as I'm here, you can fire me if you want or whatever. You can leave, but that's what I'm about, and I hope that is what you are about. I think if you are, that could be a point for you to get excited about that today. Let's pray as we close.